貴様の拳などかほどにも効かんわい。お前はもう死んでいる。何？
The KF41 Lynx seems like an appealing vehicle to grind the Italian Ground 3-4, but it's actually very mediocre. Compared to similar light tanks of other nations, any of the features that might justify it being 10.7 are just gimmicks. Let me show you. Side note, I find it absolutely hilarious how hard this vehicle makes Germany main scope. Whenever you see a mention of this vehicle, you see people who go on how it should have been in the German tree. Like, why do you want it so awful? You're better off with the Puma. Let's get the obvious main selling point out of the way, and one of two reasons the Lynx is at 10.7. The fireline forgets Spike 80 GMs. They have a max useful range of about 4 km with 700mm of tandem heat penetration. It's very good at punching through ERA, something very common on Soviet tanks which you'll fight a lot at this tier. And they automatically home in on the target. You can even launch multiple at once. On paper, spikes seem like a pretty good weapon, but in reality they kinda suck. They will either lose lock and self-destruct, hit the target dead center of the turret cheek, or deal absolutely no damage. I'm usually more surprised when they do actually kill something. They're way too overhyped and I'd rather just have TOW2s instead. You get a lot of them at least, you can just spam them and eventually you'll get a kill. I lied, you get 2. I don't even know how to make this funny, it's fucking 2. The launcher is angled up, meaning there's a massive minimum range on flat ground, and an even larger one when using a hill for hull down gameplay, which you should be doing as the Lynx is gargantuan. Of course, all of what I just said is assuming you managed to get a lock in the first place, which by itself is a massive challenge, as any tiny little twig can prevent the missile from acquiring a lock. Don't even think of trying to lock someone who is in a hull down position. However, it's actually decently good at smacking helis down if they're within about 3 km. It's really maneuverable, and since it's smokeless they won't have a clue it's coming. In essence, the fireline forget 80 GM is more like forget about firing. It's an entire battle trying to use it, and most of the time I just die without using a single missile. Moving on from the disaster that is the 80 GMs, this big cat is armed with a 2-plane stabilized 30mm autocannon. The gun handling is actually fantastic, with 60 degrees per second for both the turret traverse and gun elevation speed on an A screw. Laying your gun on target should be no problem. As for spotting the target, both the gunner and commander get some fucking crispy 3rd generation thermals with great zoom to boot. You also have access to a laser rangefinder, so hitting distant targets is no problem, but all of that is minimum expectations for a rank 7 top tier vehicle. There is an IRST auto tracker, which allows you to track planes and calculate the lead, which is a bit iffy as your belt options are kind of not that great for shooting at planes as well as the fire rate. Anybody who loved the Dardo 25mm will be disappointed, as it's only 200 rounds per minute on the Lynx. As for what you're firing out of this 30mm, you have access to 4 belts. The stock APDS belt only has 87mm of flat, point-blank pin. It's difficult to destroy anything more serious than a light tank or 2nd generation MBT like the Leopard 1A5. You should aim to unlock the darts belt as soon as possible. Speaking of which, the unlockable APFSDS build at rank 3 in the modifications is significantly better experience. It's pretty punchy with just above 120mm of flat point blank pin. You can easily destroy MBTs from the side with it, and other light tanks are very easy to kill from basically anywhere. But most MBTs are frontally immune to it, so if you do find yourself in that sticky situation, aim to disable the barrel first followed by their tracks. There's an A-head build, which is just a shrapnel shell with a time to use. It's supposedly very good at knocking down aircraft, but Gaijin refuses to model it accurately. You still have to range find the target manually to set the time fuse, instead of it dynamically programming the fuse in each shot like its real life counterpart. The last option is just a plain old high explosive build. If you want to take a build for anti-aircraft, I suggest you take this one over the A-head build, but quite honestly I just prefer to use the APFSDS build for everything. You can choose 2 out of the 4 builds to take into battle, and 3 magazines combined total. I suggest you just take a full load of 3 APFSDS builds and do not bother with anything else really. You have a coaxial low caliber machine gun, which is as useless as it sounds, and a remote controlled stabilized 50 caliber machine gun, which is pretty nice to have on any tank. It also houses the commander sight. Do note that you cannot aim to the right as a spike launcher obstructs it. As for when you're on the receiving end of cannon fire, the armor is actually better than you'd expect for a light tank. The entire hull is layered with 15mm of high hardness rolled armor plates almost everywhere, apart from the lower plate and rear, with 20mm of rolled armor right below. The upper plate is at a great angle, making it immune to most autocannons, including dart belts like the BMP-2Ms, which is a very common opponent for the KF41. However, the turret leaves much to be desired. It's about 40mm of total protection at best, and it's also where 2 of the 3 crew members sit. As for survivability, I find it weird. I find myself either surviving the craziest shit of all time, wondering how I'm still alive, or I get one tapped in 5 nanoseconds. The sights are lined with fuel tanks, which may sometimes just absorb all spalling, leaving the enemy guided. The ammo is stored in a blowout compartment. If your ammo is detonated, most of the time you'll survive, but you lose all your ammo, leaving you helplessly rushing to a friendly capture point to replenish, which is when you will die anyway, because you have no ammo. But all of that is to be expected for a light tank. But there is one pretty unique feature for a light tank that up until now has only been seen on MBTs, which is an active protection system, or APS, which is the only other reason this vehicle is at its current battle rating. The KF41 APS covers the vehicle all round. It's these panels surrounding the hull, which when it works, will intercept and destroy any slow enough projectile, like an ATGM or a heat shield on the slower end of things. Except it's broken. It has always been since release, and Gaijin still refuses to fix it properly. It has gotten better since then, but it's still incredibly hit or miss whether it will intercept a projectile and save you. It may save you once, but you'll be sure it won't save you again. But what the Lynx lacks in armor, it makes up for in mobility, which is definitely this vehicle's strongest and most consistent point. The max speed is 75 km/h, which is incredibly fast for a tracked vehicle, and is only beat by the RU251 and the HSTVL. And as for getting up to that speed, the acceleration is very quick thanks to the 26 horsepower per ton provided by the power plant, and most of the times you can even reach your max speed while off-roading. You get very responsive and quick neutral steering, and a decent reverse gear which tops out at 32 km/h. Not the fastest, but still fast enough to get you out of sticky situations. For the utilities Big Cat over here gets, you have 10 deployments of 2 smoke grenades at your disposal, which is pretty impressive and something I like very much about this vehicle. Other than that, it's pretty bog standard for a rank 7 light tank. So, with no armor, mediocre firepower and great mobility, how should you use it? Well, if you've grinded the entire Italian tree and got to this point, you should already know how. The key advantage for basically every Italian vehicle is mobility, and you must use the mobility of the Lynx to your advantage.
I'm fast as fuck, boy!
You should have no trouble pushing into an early game position behind enemy lines, allowing you to side shoot people not expecting you with your 30mm. You may face other tanks on the way there, but most likely they'll be light tanks that you can just destroy with your autocannon. In urban maps, flanking should be your main goal. There's usually a vacant corridor on most city maps you can use to just scoot around and find at least 2 to 3 enemy players facing away from you. Notice that I haven't mentioned spikes. They really are that much of a gimmick. They may land you a fun occasional kill, but you shouldn't go out of your way to use them. But honestly, do you really want to use it? While the vehicle isn't strictly terrible, it being the only ground vehicle at 10.7 and one of only 2 Italian 10.7 vehicles, you really don't have any meaningful lineup to use it with. The Frecce is at 10.3 and it has 4 times more spikes, and the 25mm is in my opinion better. The Dardo or VCC 8030 being honestly more versatile than both at a lower BR. The only way you can use the KF41 is to up-tier the entire 10.3 lineup to 10.7, or to up-tier the vehicle to 11.3. Both of these options sound equally unappealing. If this vehicle does ever go down to 10.3, it might just be worth using if you want a fun, speedy, and in my opinion sick looking light tank to use.